What kind of joke makes a husband walk out and order a DNA test in front of everyone? How did a careless comment at a family dinner turn into a legal nightmare that tore my marriage apart? My name is Lenora Vale. I'm 33, and if you'd asked me a year ago, I would have said I had the kind of marriage most women dreamed about. Ethan, my husband, was steady, kind, and patient to a fault. Too patient, maybe. The kind of man who folds laundry without being asked, who fixes what's broken, who calls his mother every Sunday. People used to say I was lucky. I believed them, until I didn't. Somewhere between our mortgage payments and parent-teacher meetings, I started feeling invisible, like I'd become an accessory in his calm little world instead of the center of it. And when my new boss, Damian Cole, started noticing me, the hair, the perfume, the way I worded emails, it felt like sunlight after years of dull weather. I told myself it was harmless, that I wasn't doing anything wrong by enjoying the attention. After all, Ethan barely looked at me anymore unless I reminded him. It started with jokes, the kind that sound innocent if you say them with the right smile. Damian would tease me about how office husbands were a thing, and I'd roll my eyes and tell him he was trouble. I didn't tell Ethan, obviously. He wouldn't have understood. It would have just turned into another talk about boundaries and respect. He'd ask why I needed validation from another man, and I'd say he was overreacting. He always overreacted. Or maybe I just said that because it was easier than admitting I liked it. Liked the way Damian's voice softened when he said my name, the way he lingered when he passed my desk. I started dressing a little nicer for work. Nothing crazy, just enough to feel seen again. I told myself it was about confidence, professionalism, presentation. But deep down, I knew exactly who I wanted to notice. At home, things started shifting. Ethan would ask why I came home late, and I'd tell him we were on a deadline. He'd sigh, make dinner for Sophie, and leave my plate covered on the counter. Sometimes I'd walk in and find him already asleep on the couch, with the TV still on. That quiet used to feel peaceful. Now it just made me restless. I started complaining to my sister Hannah about how Ethan had changed, how he didn't make me feel special anymore. She told me I sounded ungrateful. Maybe I was, but I didn't want to admit it, because in my head, I was the one trying. I was the one keeping things interesting. I didn't realize how fast that self-pity was turning into something uglier, something that would burn through everything I thought I could control. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. It started at work, like most of my mistakes do. Damian had just come back from a client meeting, still in his suit jacket, sleeves rolled up, and that little smirk he always gets when he knows everyone's looking. I was finishing a report when he leaned against my desk and asked how Sophie was doing. My daughter. He always remembered her name. Most people at the office didn't even know I had a kid until I mentioned her in passing, but Damian did. He asked if she still liked dinosaurs, if she'd started losing her baby teeth. I laughed and said she was obsessed with a new cartoon and talked non-stop. He said she must get that from me, and the whole office chuckled. It felt harmless, maybe even sweet. I didn't realize Ethan would hear about it later. That afternoon, our team went out for lunch to celebrate a new campaign launch. It was loud, casual, too many drinks for a workday. Someone joked that Damian and I made a great duo, and before I could think, I said something stupid like, "Ha! With how much Sophie looks like him, maybe he's her twin." The table erupted in laughter. Even I laughed. Too loud, too long. It was a dumb joke. Everyone knew it was a joke. But in the back of my mind, I noticed the way Damian's smile froze for a second before he recovered. Later that day, my coworker Megan pulled me aside and said I might want to be careful about what I say. I rolled my eyes and told her to relax. "You think Ethan's going to believe I actually meant it?" I said. "He's not that sensitive." I was wrong. Ethan found out 2 days later, Someone from my office, probably Megan, sent him the video. A short, grainy clip of me laughing too loudly, tossing my hair, and saying that ridiculous line. When I came home that evening, he was sitting on the couch, phone in hand, staring at the paused frame. He didn't yell. He didn't even look angry. Just tired. He asked if I really thought that kind of joke was funny. I told him it was office humor, nothing serious. He said, "You realize people are going to think you're implying something, right?" I crossed my arms, defensive before he even finished. "You always think the worst of me. It was a joke, Ethan. Everyone laughed." He said it wasn't about them laughing. It was about me. About why I'd even say something like that. I said he was overanalyzing. He said he couldn't shake the image of his wife calling another man their daughter's twin. I laughed then, because what else could I do? "You're being ridiculous," I said. "If you can't handle a joke, that's not my problem." The silence that followed was so sharp it felt like a cut. That night, he didn't eat dinner. He tucked Sophie into bed early and went to the garage. I heard him moving boxes around, pretending to be busy. I waited, expecting him to come back inside, to apologize for overreacting. He didn't. By morning, he'd left for work before I woke up. I texted him mid-morning. "Still mad?" No reply. I sent another. "It was a joke, Ethan. Don't make this weird." Still nothing. At work, Damien noticed I was quiet and asked if I was okay. I told him Ethan was being dramatic about something stupid. He smiled sympathetically and said, "Men can be fragile sometimes." The way he said it made me feel like I was in on some private truth only we understood. That night, I told myself Ethan would get over it. He always did. But when I walked in the door, he was waiting for me with the video playing again on his phone. "So this is what you do when I'm at home with our daughter," he said. His voice wasn't loud, just calm in a way that scared me more than shouting would have. I tried to take his hand, but he pulled away. "I'm not stupid, Lenora. You've been distant for months, late nights, inside jokes about your boss, and now this." I told him to stop turning everything into drama, that if he wanted to feel neglected, he'd always find a reason. He said quietly, "Maybe I'm just starting to see what's been there all along." I didn't answer. I grabbed my bag and went upstairs. When I finally looked out the window later that night, his car was gone. For 3 days, Ethan barely spoke to me. He'd go to work, come home, help Sophie with her homework, and disappear into the garage again. It was like living with a ghost. The house stayed unnervingly clean, like he'd already started detaching himself from it. I told Hannah about it over coffee. She said maybe I should just apologize, make peace before it got worse. I scoffed. Apologize for what? For making a joke? She looked at me for a long time, then said softly, "You don't joke about that kind of thing, Len." I told her she was taking his side, as usual. When I got home that evening, Ethan was cooking dinner. The smell of garlic and onions filled the air. He didn't look up when I walked in. "You don't have to cook," I said, trying to sound casual. "I can order something." He said he preferred doing it himself. That was all. Just that. But his tone made my skin prickle. We ate in silence, Sophie chatting happily about school, while Ethan nodded and smiled at all the right times. When she went upstairs to brush her teeth, he finally looked at me. "Did you ever think about how that joke might sound?" I said. "You're still on that? You're seriously making me feel like I did something evil." He sighed. "Do you even care what it looked like? You're a mother, Lenora. People are talking about you online. Someone uploaded that clip. My coworkers saw it." I froze. "Your coworkers?" He nodded. "One of them showed me today. Said it must have been hard being the punchline of your wife's joke." I wanted to say I didn't know about the video going public, but he wouldn't have believed me. So I doubled down. "Maybe if you didn't act so uptight all the time, people wouldn't think I have to joke to have fun." He just looked at me, quiet again. I hated that silence. I'd rather have him shout, slam something, anything. Finally, he said, "Maybe you like humiliating me. Maybe that's the only way you feel in control." I stood up. "You're twisting everything. I can't even breathe around you without being accused of something." He didn't argue. He just said, "You're right. I won't accuse you of anything. I'll just find out." I frowned. "Find out what?" He looked straight at me and said, "The truth." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house made me think he was downstairs making calls, checking something, planning something. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Sophie giggling. Ethan was sitting with her at the breakfast table, showing her a DNA model from her science kit. "See, everyone has their own code," he said. "That's how we know who's who." He looked up at me briefly. "Isn't that right, Lenora?" My chest tightened. "What are you getting at?" He smiled faintly. "Nothing, just teaching her about truth." By the time Hannah came over later that afternoon, I was pacing the kitchen. "He's losing it," I said. "He's acting like I committed a crime." She looked uneasy. "What did he say exactly?" "That he's going to find out the truth, whatever that means." She hesitated, then asked, "Len, did you ever—" I cut her off before she could finish. "No, God, no. Damien's just my boss. That's all." But the way she looked at me made my stomach twist. That evening, Ethan came home early, calm as ever. We sat down to dinner with Sophie and Marjorie, his mother, who'd stopped by unannounced. Halfway through the meal, she mentioned seeing something on Facebook about a funny office video. Ethan's fork clinked against his plate. I wanted to crawl out of my skin. Marjorie smiled tightly. "You have quite a sense of humor, dear." I forced a laugh. "Oh, that old thing. It was nothing serious." Ethan set down his fork. "You know, Mom, Lenora thinks Sophie looks like Damien. She says it's uncanny." Marjorie raised an eyebrow. "Really?" I kicked him under the table, but he didn't flinch. "Ethan, stop," I hissed. "Don't twist my words." He shrugged. "Just sharing the joke. Everyone's heard it by now." Sophie looked between us, confused. "Who's Damien?" My throat went dry. "Just Mommy's boss, honey." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "Maybe we should settle this once and for all. Get some proof." Marjorie frowned. "Proof of what?" He smiled. "DNA, just to make sure we all understand the joke." I dropped my fork. "You're out of your mind," he said quietly. "Maybe. But I'd rather be crazy with evidence than calm and blind." The rest of dinner was unbearable. Sophie started crying because she didn't understand why Daddy was mad. Marjorie took her to the living room to distract her with cartoons. I stood in the kitchen, shaking. "You want to humiliate me now?" I whispered. "In front of your mother?" He said, "You did that yourself." When he went upstairs, I grabbed my phone and texted Damien. "He's losing it. Might ask for some ridiculous test." Damien replied almost instantly, "You should probably get ahead of it. Maybe calm him down before it spreads further." Before it spreads further. That's when I realized Ethan wasn't bluffing. The next morning, I found a sealed envelope on the counter. Inside was a receipt from a private lab, his signature at the bottom. The note beside it read, "Results in 10 days. I tore it in half, then in half again, but it didn't matter. The damage was already done. I thought I could talk him out of it, that he'd realize how absurd it was. But deep down, I knew he wasn't acting out of rage. He was too calm, too deliberate, and calm men with proof are far more dangerous than angry ones. The night of the dinner at Marjorie's house, I spent an hour trying to convince myself Ethan wouldn't actually go through with it. He wasn't the type for scenes. He was private, measured. Even when angry, he kept his tone level. That's what I kept telling myself while I straightened my hair and reapplied lipstick. Hannah texted that she'd meet us there, and I almost didn't reply. I felt like every woman in my life was silently judging me, and I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of seeing me nervous. When we arrived, the house smelled like roast chicken and resentment. Marjorie greeted Sophie with open arms, but barely glanced at me. I smiled anyway, pretending not to notice. Ethan was quiet, carrying a gift for his mother like everything was normal. That unsettled me more than any argument could have. I wanted him angry. Anger was familiar. Silence wasn't. Dinner started pleasantly enough, with small talk about Sophie's school and Marjorie's church group. Hannah arrived late, sitting across from me and giving me that cautious look she reserves for when she's trying to save me from myself. I avoided her eyes. I could feel the tension tightening around the table, waiting for something to snap. Halfway through the meal, Marjorie said she'd seen a video on Facebook that reminded her of me. The one with the funny office lady who made a joke about her boss. She laughed lightly, pretending she didn't know. Ethan set his fork down and said, "It wasn't just a joke." I felt every muscle in my body tense. "Ethan, not here," I whispered. He didn't stop. "Since everyone's heard the story already, I think it's fair to clear it up." Hannah's eyes widened. "Ethan, maybe we should—" He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, crisp and white. "You see this? It's the DNA test. I picked it up this morning." Marjorie froze mid-bite. "DNA test?" I forced a laugh, trying to sound incredulous. "You actually did it? You've lost your mind!" He smiled, but there was no warmth. "No, I just decided to stop guessing." Hannah whispered, "Ethan, please." But he cut her off. "No, she's been mocking me for weeks, and I think everyone deserves to know how deep her jokes go." Marjorie looked between us, horror and curiosity battling in her eyes. "What's in that envelope?" Ethan said simply, "The truth." My throat went dry. Sophie was in the other room, coloring at the coffee table, thankfully out of earshot. I wanted to scream at him, to grab the envelope and burn it. Instead, I reached for my wine glass, trying to look calm. "This is ridiculous. You've embarrassed yourself enough." Ethan said quietly, "You're right. I've been embarrassing myself for years, defending you. I could feel everyone watching me, waiting." Hannah whispered that maybe we should step outside, but Ethan stayed put. He opened the envelope slowly, like he wanted every second of it to sting. "The test shows I'm Sophie's biological father," he said finally. The relief hit me for half a heartbeat. Then he added, "But that's not the point, is it? The point is you thought there needed to be proof." The room went silent. Even Marjorie didn't move. I said, "So now what? You got your little experiment, you happy?" He stood. "No, but I'm done being your punchline." Then he left the envelope on the table and walked out. For a moment, no one breathed. Then Hannah said softly, "Lenora, what did you do?" I snapped back, "Nothing. He's insane." Marjorie's voice was sharp. "No, dear. He's humiliated, and that's worse." That was the night Ethan stopped being my husband and started being my adversary. The next week felt like free fall. Ethan moved into a rented apartment near his office, told Sophie he needed space to think, and started sending polite, formal texts about her school schedule. I tried calling, but he didn't answer. The messages he sent me were cold, practical, and terrifyingly professional. At work, I tried to pretend everything was fine. Damien avoided eye contact the moment I walked in. HR had clearly told him something, probably about workplace boundaries or gossip. He didn't stop by my desk anymore. He sent emails. Short ones. "Need the numbers by 3 p.m. Client moved meeting. No more playful comments. No more lunch invitations. On Thursday, I finally cornered him near the elevators. "You're really going to act like I'm invisible now?" I said. He looked uncomfortable. "Lenora, it's not that. Things are just messy right now. You should handle things with your husband before anyone else gets dragged in." Dragged in, like I'd caught him in something he never wanted to be part of. I laughed bitterly. "You don't want to get dragged in? You started half of this." He sighed. "Look, Nothing actually happened, okay? Let's keep it that way. I've got a reputation to protect. That stung more than I expected. Oh, don't worry, I said. You'll get to keep your spotless image. You always do. The doors closed before he could answer. I spent the next few days trying to salvage control. I called Hannah, but she stopped picking up after our last fight. I texted her once, "He's freezing my accounts, can he even do that?" And she replied hours later, "You should talk to a lawyer." When I checked our joint bank app, half the money was gone. I confronted Ethan through text, and he responded, "It's within my rights to protect marital assets during a separation. You'll be notified." Notified, like I was a stranger. That Friday, an email arrived from a family law firm addressed to both of us. Preliminary mediation notice. Attached were scanned documents, custody proposal, financial disclosures, even a list of marital assets. I felt my stomach drop as I read the section about morally questionable public conduct leading to reputational risk. He was documenting everything. I drove to his apartment that night, heart pounding. When he opened the door, he didn't even look surprised. "I figured you'd come eventually," he said. I pushed past him. "You can't just freeze me out of my own life, Ethan." He crossed his arms. "Our life, Lenora. You made it yours the moment you brought him into it." I said, "Nothing happened with Damien. You're just looking for a reason to punish me." He didn't blink. "Then I guess the jokes, the lies, and the texts are all coincidences." "What texts?" I snapped. He gestured toward his desk. A neatly organized folder sat there. "Phone logs, screenshots, receipts from restaurants you told me were late nights at work." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "You've been spying on me?" He shook his head. "I've been protecting myself. From you." I felt cornered, small. "You're cruel." "No," he said softly. "I'm careful. Something you never learned to be." He picked up his keys and opened the door, motioning for me to leave. "The lawyer will explain everything. Please don't come here unannounced again." I wanted to scream, to hit him, to make him feel something other than that cold politeness. But he just stood there, watching me with eyes that didn't even look angry anymore. Just done. When I got home, half the house was empty. His clothes, his tools, even the framed photo from our wedding. In the kitchen, a manila envelope sat on the counter next to my phone charger. Inside was another lawyer's card and a handwritten note for custody arrangements. "I'll be civil if you are." I tore it up and threw it in the sink. The next morning, I found out from a friend that Ethan had told his boss he'd be working remotely to handle family legal matters. Meanwhile, people at my office had started whispering. The HR manager called me in and said there had been complaints about inappropriate workplace interactions. I said there was no affair. She looked at me like she didn't believe me. "I hope that's true, Mrs. Vale, because we can't afford a lawsuit if your husband pursues defamation." I walked out, trembling. Damien wouldn't even look up from his laptop as I passed his office. That evening, I called Hannah again. "He's trying to destroy me," I said. Her voice was flat. "He's trying to protect his daughter, Lenora. Maybe you should think about that." I hung up. When I went to bed that night, I kept replaying everything. Damien's distance, Ethan's precision, Marjorie's coldness. They were all against me now. I was the villain in everyone's story. The next morning, a courier knocked on my door. He handed me a thick envelope and asked for my signature. "Who's it from?" I asked. "Vale Ethan," he said. Inside were printed statements, his lawyer's letter, proof of a separate bank account, and copies of texts between me and Damien that I'd deleted months ago. He had everything. At the bottom of the stack was a note written in his careful handwriting. "Consider this the last time I give you the courtesy of surprise." I sank onto the couch, shaking. He wasn't just angry, he was methodical. He'd built a case brick by brick while I'd been busy laughing at jokes I thought made me look clever. That night, I stared at Sophie sleeping in her bed, her small hand curled around her toy dinosaur. I whispered, "Mommy's fixing it, okay?" But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. I wasn't fixing anything. I was watching the walls close in. The day of mediation, I showed up early, dressed in my most professional outfit. Cream blouse, navy skirt, hair tied back the way Ethan always used to say made me look put together. I wanted to look composed, reasonable. Not like the desperate woman everyone seemed to think I was. The law office was cold, the kind of sterile place that makes you feel small before anyone even speaks. A receptionist handed me a clipboard and said Mr. Vale was already inside. My stomach tightened. Ethan was never late for anything, so of course he'd arrive first, always prepared, always calm. When the door opened, he was sitting across from his lawyer, papers neatly stacked in front of him. He didn't look at me when I walked in, not a single glance. The mediator, a middle-aged woman with soft eyes and sharp posture, smiled and asked us to sit. "We're here to resolve things peacefully," she said. I wanted to laugh. Peaceful? Nothing about this felt peaceful. Ethan's lawyer began, reading through the proposed custody agreement. He wanted shared custody on paper, but the conditions were clear. Sophie's primary residence would be with him. My visits would be scheduled, supervised for the first 3 months. To ensure emotional stability, the lawyer said. I interrupted. "You make it sound like I'm some danger to my own child." Ethan finally looked at me, his face unreadable. No one said danger, just instability. I turned to the mediator. He's punishing me, because of a rumor, because I made a stupid joke. The lawyer slid a folder across the table. "Mrs. Vale, I think it's best you review this." Inside were printed emails, screenshots, and text threads. Every careless word I thought had vanished. Flirty jokes to Damien, late night, "thanks again for listening" messages, receipts for dinners I'd claimed were business meetings. My breath caught. "You went through my phone?" Ethan said quietly. "You left your laptop open. I didn't have to go far." I could feel my face burning. "So now you're spying on me, digging through my life? That's low, even for you." He didn't raise his voice. "You humiliated me in public, Lenora. I'm just making sure the truth is recorded this time." The mediator cleared her throat gently. "Let's keep this civil." Civil. I wanted to scream. Ethan leaned forward, his tone even. "I'm not trying to destroy you, Lenora. I just want stability for Sophie. That means structure. It means no more lies, no more harmless jokes." I said, "You're acting like I cheated on you." He looked me straight in the eye. "Did you?" I didn't answer. The silence stretched. After a long pause, he said, "Then this is what happens when you let people wonder." His lawyer continued explaining property division, asset protection, and account documentation. Every sentence was like a nail in the coffin of my old life. When it was my turn to speak, I tried to sound confident. "I've been under stress. My marriage was suffocating. I didn't feel seen. Is that a crime?" Ethan said, "It's not a crime. It's a choice." The mediator asked if I wanted to respond to the custody terms. My throat felt tight. "I want shared custody, full time. I'm her mother." Ethan's lawyer shook his head. "Not with your recent public behavior, Mrs. Vale. There are videos, comments, witness statements from the dinner, even reports from your workplace." I snapped, "Who's sending you that? Damien?" Ethan looked down. "Does it matter?" The mediator tried to diffuse the tension, summarizing our positions. Mr. Vale seeks stability for the child. Mrs. Vale seeks equal parenting rights. Both claim to have Sophie's best interest at heart. I leaned forward. "He's doing this to punish me because he can't handle embarrassment." Ethan exhaled slowly. "You embarrassed yourself, Lenora. I just stopped cleaning up after you." It was brutal in its calmness. At the end, The mediator asked each of us to state what we wanted most out of this process. Ethan spoke first. "Peace," he said. "For Sophie, not for us." When it was my turn, I couldn't find the words. My voice cracked as I said, "I just want my family back." Ethan didn't flinch. "Then you should have protected it." He stood, gathered his papers, and thanked the mediator politely before leaving. I stayed seated long after the door closed, staring at the empty chair where he'd been. The mediator finally said softly, "Sometimes control looks like calm, Mrs. Vale. Don't mistake it for mercy." That sentence followed me home like a ghost. A week later, the custody arrangement was official. The judge approved Ethan's petition for temporary guardianship until the final hearing. Sophie would stay with him Monday through Friday and visit me on weekends. The lawyer called it routine, but it felt like exile. The first Saturday I picked Sophie up, Ethan didn't come to the door. He sent her out with a packed bag and a polite note. "Back by 7. Please don't confuse her with adult matters." I wanted to crumple the note and throw it away, but Sophie was watching. So I smiled and said everything was fine. We baked cookies, watched her favorite cartoon, and played in the park. I pretended I wasn't dying inside. When I dropped her off that evening, Ethan stepped out to take her bag. He looked rested, composed, like a man who'd finally found balance. I said quietly, "Can we talk?" He didn't move. "About what?" "Us." He shook his head. "There's no us anymore. There's only parenting schedules and paperwork." I stepped closer. "You don't mean that, you can't." He said, "You taught me something, Lenora. That dignity matters more than love." I felt my chest tighten. "So this is your revenge? Taking everything because your pride's hurt?" He looked at me evenly. "No, this is me stopping the bleeding." I didn't have an answer for that. The next few weeks blurred together. Gossip spread faster than truth ever could. Someone at work leaked that I was under HR review. Damien transferred to another branch to avoid workplace complications. I caught whispers when I walked past desks. Hannah stopped calling. Marjorie didn't return my messages. Even my mother said maybe a little humility would help me reflect. I told myself they'd all see how unfair this was once things cooled down. But nothing cooled. It only hardened. One afternoon I went to Sophie's school to drop off her forgotten lunchbox. I saw Ethan there standing by the gates talking to one of the teachers. He looked relaxed, smiling. When he saw me, his expression changed, polite but distant. I said, "Can we talk for a minute?" He nodded to the teacher, then followed me toward the parking lot. I said, "I don't want to fight anymore. Can we at least be civil?" He said, "We are civil. That's what you wanted, isn't it? To be treated like a colleague instead of a wife?" I blinked hard. "You're twisting everything." He looked past me, watching Sophie through the fence. "I'm not twisting anything. I'm just finally being honest." I said, "You can't erase everything we built." He smiled faintly. "I already did. Legally, at least." A silence fell between us, heavy and final. The bell rang and children poured out, shouting and laughing. Sophie ran to him first, her backpack bouncing, her smile wide. He lifted her effortlessly, the way he used to lift me onto counters when we were first dating. That thought made me dizzy. She looked at me and waved. "Bye, Mommy." I waved back, my throat too tight to speak. Ethan set her down and guided her toward the car. I followed them with my eyes, waiting for him to turn around, to offer even a shred of softness. He didn't. When I got home, an email was waiting from my lawyer. The subject line read, "Finalized agreement, property division and custody terms." I opened it slowly. Every line felt like a verdict. The house went to Ethan. My car, my savings, split evenly, but most of it tied to conditions I'd have to meet to regain joint custody. Therapy sessions, proof of emotional rehabilitation, regular reporting. At the bottom was a digital signature from Ethan Vale. I stared at it for a long time, until the words blurred. Later that evening, I texted him one last time. We can still fix this. Please. For Sophie. He replied almost instantly, she's fine, don't confuse her. She already knows the truth. What truth? I typed. That her mother likes attention more than love. I dropped the phone. Outside it started to rain, the soft, steady kind that makes everything look clean for a moment before the mud seeps through again. I stood by the window, watching the streetlights reflect on the wet pavement. For the first time, I didn't feel angry or defensive, just empty. The next morning, I went to pick Sophie up for our weekend. Ethan didn't come to the door again. She did. She was wearing the little blue raincoat he'd bought her last month. She smiled and said, "Daddy says you're better now." I forced a nod. "Yeah, baby. I'm trying." She hugged me, small arms tight around my waist. For a second, I closed my eyes and let the moment hold me up. When she ran back to get her backpack, I saw Ethan standing by the window inside. He didn't wave. The lawyer's notification pinged on my phone as I buckled Sophie into her seat. Subject: court approval. Confirmed. The rain picked up again. I sat there for a long moment, watching the drops race down the windshield. Then I turned the key and drove away without looking back. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.